Hey everybody, I'm just wanting to do a little bit of an update today for the Marvel Crisis Protocol as well as the Musty Wargamers. I'm going to start with the Musty Wargamers real quick. We are doing a show tonight, as we do typically every 2 weeks during the season, and so that will be over at Rusty or Helcrec's channel as usual. And so that's typically 8 Mountain, 9 Central. And so we'll see you there. There, just in case you're interested, the topics tonight, we are actually having Curtis from Dash of Elan over at the show joining us for the discussion as a guest. And we have one topic that was suggested on a prior episode by Dan Booman, and it's related to whether it feels inappropriate to play games that have to do with war, as far as the carnage and destruction. And we'll go more into the topic in his question in particular, but just it's that sort of question around whether we're glorifying or minimizing, certain aspects of war when we play war games. And so just a really good topic of discussion. And as well, I believe Curtis will be bringing a topic of discussion tonight too that has to do with, I believe, historical board games versus historical war board games versus historical tabletop games that are based in history and war, and just sort of comparing those two. And so I'll let him introduce the topic properly. And so I will mention that for those of you that would like to see the show live or are interested in things that are going on behind the scenes as far as hobby updates and things from folks that participate in the show, both folks that are in the comments and attend live or folks that are on camera, you can always go to the Musty Wargamers Facebook page, which has a sort of burgeoning group or ever-growing group of individuals that do participate and tend to come to the live show as well as just hang out in Facebook and post things that they're up to, in particular the Old Hammer challenges and things like that. Okay, so yeah, please join us tonight. And so I actually ended up doing a little more than I thought I would as far as putting Marvel Crisis Protocol stuff together, because I thought I'll just do one model just to sort of tinker with while I'm doing my French Indian War stuff. And then I thought, well, if I'm going to actually get my airbrush going and prime all this stuff, I might as well just do some. And so I actually broke into the core set, and I've done MODOK and Hulk. And I showed some of this stuff on the Musty Wargamers Facebook page, but not all of it. One thing I did do is I ended up changing the Hulk's hairstyle to a bit more of an older, retro, savage Hulk. Because, as some folks may remember from the Night Models Marvel game, I'm doing a bit of a retro table, like almost like a Spider-Man cartoon or something that reminds me of the 70s and 80s comics. What you get with the game is I really like this model, by the way, but what you get is a kind of more of a clean-cut look. And, that they had in other versions of the Hulk over time. And, yeah, I opted for a bit of more ruddier look with the savage, wild hair that he had in the early comics. In particular, in the 70s and the early 80s, he kind of had this mop kind of look on his head. And so that's kind of what I went with. And for MODOK, I don't know how many of you even know about this character. He's not the most commonly known character for folks that aren't into Marvel. You wouldn't see him in a lot of stuff, but he's a very retro character. For MODOK, they gave this... He has had his chair that he rides. He's this little telepathic, part man, part machine kind of villain. And in the comics, he actually has had a chair that would almost shoot like an engine underneath, like exhaust. But the early versions, I believe, focused on him having a bit of a hover chair, like he was kind of futuristic and he had a hover chair. So I ordered myself some acrylic rods, and I cut an acrylic rod, and I'm kind of going to place his chair. I'm leaving a little piece off, that's sort of the exhaust piece on the bottom of that piece, and I'm going to have something closer to the some of the earlier comics that I'm going to model a paint job off of and have him just hovering along on his futuristic chair. So he's not glued on there right now because I'll have to do that last. I'll have to paint him up. I'm leaving it clear, the rod, and so I'm just going to do that last. And so I grabbed a couple others in order. I spent the most time on Ultron. He had sort of the most pieces. And so we have Ultron, who's actually a fairly large model, you know, in comparison to the core set. The expansion ones, like the MODOK and the Hulk, are quite big, but Ultron's pretty large for a character in the basic set. And he had a fair bit to put on, or a fair bit of pieces, I should say. And then after Ultron, it kind of got progressively easier. They're fairly easy models to put together. I know I saw on Facebook that some people have had some trouble with some of the other releases, that they have like really little bits at times where it's like the top of a hand or something. I haven't really encountered anything too dramatic yet in the core set. This is Crossbones, another character that not everybody's really familiar with. He was, if you watch the movies, he was in Captain America #2, Winter Soldier. There's a point where they have this big fight scene, kind of towards the beginning, where they fight this guy. He's not quite a big superhero, but he's not quite a regular person. He's pretty tough. It's actually this guy. Yeah. And so he was really enjoyable together because he was really easy. And then another really easy one was Red Skull. Some of you will probably recognize him. He's got the cosmic cube from the movies, powerful character, villain. I did put together more villains for whatever reason, expansions. I guess the Hulk is both, could be good and bad depending on if you follow the comics. Most characters can be like that, but the Hulk especially. And then, of course, who could mistake Spider-Man? So, yeah, I'm looking forward to painting him. This model is really nice. It went together really nice, but the pose and everything is just... It's a really cool model. It's very fluid. Yeah, quite like that. I thought about doing another conversion. I had sort of this big idea that I was going to have him up off the ground with a rod that I would paint black, just kind of elevating him up and then putting some wire around him, drilling through his wrist and just doing this spool of wire around him that I would then double wrap and then paint it really white with black wash to make it look like a web. I just decided, no, I'm just gonna leave it. I'm doing some little things with the Hulk and MODOK. I'm not going too far with the conversions. I could have, but got other things to do. So I think it looks pretty good the way they set it up, and that's the way I'm going to leave it. Just two things I was going to show real quick. For those of you interested quickly in Knight models and how the models compare, and some other scale issues, because I did do a video, if you remember, on scale in some of these games. Yeah, there is some differences, but I'll show them here. I think with the ones that... Ooh, there we go. I told you, it's not glued. With the ones that are probably closer in scale to just humanoid. We have Spider-Man here and Red Skull. And I'm just going to pan here for a second. Here I've got Red Skull and Cyclops from the Knight Models game. And they're actually... I mean, the Red Skull is definitely taller, and he's a fairly tall model. Like, he stood up straight pretty well. Like, he's not bending his legs at all. But if you can see, he's definitely a bit taller than Cyclops. Now, I believe Cyclops was one of the older sculpts from the Knight models, and they did get a little bit bigger as time went on. If you even compare, let's say, I have a Scarlet, or I should say a Black Widow. She's standing up a bit more straight. Still a bit taller, the Red Skull. You know, they're actually... I don't think there's a Marvel one that's just standing up straight that I have exactly that much, and that would be comparable in height to Red Skull there. When you start putting Spider-Man next to them, you know, because, you know, he's actually off the ground, but then he's also much smaller, and he's crouched and stuff. So he's off the ground, but he's also crouching. She's quite thin, you know, she's almost really wafy, like it's a very cartoonish look, the way her proportions are. But height-wise, they look a little better next to each other, although he's a thicker model, for sure. But if you look at something like Dr. Doom, he is raised here, but proportionate-wise now, like with his arms and stuff, you know, he looks quite a bit bigger. Even putting him next to Red Skull. They don't really look horrible next to each other on the table, in my opinion. If you were really wanting to kind of bring in some of your other characters. Some of these ones on the Knight models are raised a bit. I have a Captain America that I have to build too, so it'll be better to compare the two later. But, you know, honestly, you know, Red Skull's standing up straight, and so he looks a little taller there. I would almost say if you actually stood Captain America up there, if you brought his legs together, he'd be taller than Red Skull in that particular sculpt. I think the Knight model stuff, the scaling is a little more all over. It's not perhaps as spot on from character to character, because I think this is sort of an example of that. I think they probably go next to each other pretty well on the table. But that's all a matter of personal taste. That's what I've found out when listening to a lot of people. It really is. How much it bothers you, how much it really means anything. I'm just going to pan out here and just show some vehicles. There's a Red Skull next to Taxi. Now, Taxi is, of course, not on a base. But, you know, I think it actually works pretty good. I think in particular Spider-Man sort of leaping out in the front looks pretty good there. And this is a 1/43 scale Taxi. New York Taxi. I also have, I should have showed this before, but I have some civilians, which always looked kind of small. These are O scale. They look pretty good with the car, I think, but they look a little small. However, for the purposes of using them as token civilians in the game, I think I probably still... There isn't really a... You don't need civilians in this game, at least not yet, to my knowledge. If there is some sort of scenario where you use a token for one, I could easily use these instead. These are... they look very much like 60s to 70s sort of figures, you know, people. They have some pretty 70s, late 60s related garb, clothes on. You look at them. I still have a lot more of those to paint, but yeah, I do like those. And I was going to show, speaking of the scales being quite different for Knight models, I was going to show the Hulk side by side, Knight models and Marvel, or Knight models and yeah, Marvel Crisis Protocol. And you know, it's interesting. Overall, I would say the Knight models Hulk is bigger, you know, considerably bigger. But if you actually, his proportions are quite, stylistically, artistically, the proportions are not meant to be as in sync, you know, proportionate from body part to body part. I mean, if you look at like a normal hand and you put it up to a face of a human, the hand, you know, can take a good part of the front of the face, but the hand is not bigger than the head. If you look at the Hulk here, this fist, you could fit two of his heads practically in it. It's huge. Some of his forearm, like, dwarfs the size of his calf. So he's kind of like a mutated, gamma-ridden monstrosity here. Like, you know, he's great. It's a lovely sculpt, the Knight models one. Always liked it. But he's proportional, and he's really... The one thing I've always really loved is just how angry he looks. You just look how angry he looks in his features there. They've captured it, the Hulk, really well in that face. He's truly going ballistic. And so we have this one, and I was on some discussions on the Facebook forum with this, because I already own the previous Knight model, but I was always intending to get this one too. I have to say that I like this one better overall. Despite the fact that I like this one too, I find proportionately this one looks more sound, and just within the model itself. And it still dwarfs many of the other characters. I mean, there's a huge debate always on how big the Hulk should be, and it really is as big as the artist at the time wanted him to be. You know, he could be anywhere from 8 feet tall to, you know, 11 feet tall at different times in the literature. I really think this looks good. I do like it. I like both of them, to be honest, but I'm looking forward to painting this one up, having another version to paint up and use. It's always never been a problem. I wasn't sad when they announced that they were doing the Hulk so soon after having that character in the other game available, the previous one. So yeah, the only other thing I was going to show is for scale. Is I don't know if you remember, but I had this bus that I got that is the same size as my 143 cars, the same scale I should say, that I just showed. And so I have Spider-Man in this bus, and honestly, think it looks really good in scale. Just going to turn it here a bit. I think it looks great. The Hulk is always going to look big next to just about anything, because the Hulk won't be riding on this bus, for sure, but he might be smashing it. But yeah, I think even looking at, if I go back here, I think even our really tall, standing up straight Red Skull looks just fine going on that bus, taking his cube downtown. So, all right, everybody, that's just a little update on what I'm doing with the Marvel stuff. I'm actually going to be doing some painting of French Indian War stuff today, now that I've spent some time on this, and we've got the Musty Wargamers tonight, and hope to see you guys there. Take care.